Coming up on Tech News Weekly, we start out the week with our stories of the week. That's right, we're mixing it up. We've got Twitter adding a new feature that lets you choose who can reply and who can't, plus a conversation about Netflix trying to help save some people money if they're not using their accounts. I think that's a pretty good thing. Before we round out the show, Monica Chin from The Verge joins us to talk about students who are failing their AP tests because of a technical error with uploading images to the platform, and a conversation with Eric Ravenscraft of OneZero about life in the future with theaters and whether we're going to be watching shows from home for the rest of time. There's so much to check out in this episode of Tech News Weekly, so stay tuned. Tech News Weekly is brought to you from LastPass Studios. You're focused on security, but are your employees? Well, LastPass can ensure that they are by making access and authentication seamless, whether they're working in the office or remote. Visit lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 134, recorded Thursday, May 21st, 2020. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Now that a lot of you are working from home, it's even more important to choose a VPN you trust to protect you from online threats. For 3 extra months free with a 1-year package, go to expressvpn.com/TNW.
Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking that tech news. I am Mikah Sargent.
Yes, you are. You are Mikah Sargent. Let's start the show.
Okay, who are you, though?
Howell as well. I'm Jason Howell. I thought I could get away with it without saying my name, but you're too good. Too good, Mikah.
Or maybe I am too stuck in process, and it is okay to to switch out of process sometimes.
Right, exactly. We've done this too many times. It's just weird when we don't do it the right way. One thing that we do very differently from week to week is we have a different placement in the show for the story of the week, and this week it's at the beginning.
Yes,
should we jump in?
We're mixing it up. Yes, let's jump in. What's your story of the week?
We got to keep things fresh for us each and every week here. So I don't know if you've heard of this company. It's called Twitter. It's called a social media company. It's online. You go on, you share your thoughts. Other people follow them. Anyways, if you haven't heard of it, I totally forgive you. But Twitter might not be adding an edit button, which is a request that often comes up for Twitter to add some sort of an edit button to posts so you can edit after the fact, but I don't think they're ever going to add that. But they are testing a new set of features with a limited group of people that is allowed to essentially reply to posts. So as a poster, as a tweeter, if that's the right word for it, I could select, if I was part of this test, I could select who can reply to my posts, and it's isolated to 3 different options. Everyone, so the way it has been forever, essentially, anyone can reply to any post. People that you follow, so if you follow a certain number of people, only those people that you follow are allowed to reply, and then only people that you mention, so anybody that you put an @ mention into the thread is able to reply, and everyone else is relegated to viewing. So it doesn't mean that people who aren't able to reply can't see the post. They can still access it on Twitter. And they can like it. They could retweet. So essentially they could do like a quote tweet, retweet of it. So they wouldn't be replying to the thread. So me as the tweeter would not see those posts necessarily, but they could exist in other parts of the Twitter sphere. And yeah, I think this seems to be getting very mixed response from people. Some people seem to be really happy about the fact that we get a little bit more control over who is able to reply to our threads. Other people feel like this is kind of, another one of those changes that potentially kind of squashes the appeal to some degree, the openness of Twitter. Where do you fall on this, Mikah?
Well, it appears I'm part of this here what is it? The small group of folks that are capable of doing this tweeting thing. I don't know if you had yours set up that way. You adjusted it. Cool. So here's the deal. There are lots of bad actors on Twitter. And I don't mean folks who are incapable of pretending to be a different persona. I mean bad actors in the sense that they are meanie heads, if you will. And in that sense, I like this option where if I am on Twitter and my goal is to share information or talk to people or start a conversation with people who follow me or who I follow, then I think that this is a great thing. I think about how you go to, an in-person group, which I know a lot of us aren't doing these days, but and different people are having conversations, and you don't necessarily, as a complete and utter stranger, just run yourself into a situation and say, hello, I'm here and I have things I need to say to you. And the same thing applies to like a panel. If you go and you sit down in the audience and you're watching a panel, then it's the people on the stage that are having the conversation, and you're there to participate in the sense of being a listener and a watcher. And so in that sense, I think that this is an imitation of real life conversations. And so in that case, I think this makes sense. The problem is when it is abused and misused. And I think Twitter itself showed one example of that when it tweeted out, anyone who replies to this tweet can get verified. And they made it so that only, people mentioned in the tweet can respond. They were trying to be funny and cute, and it just wasn't funny and cute. Came off a little tone deaf. But there are lots of situations where I am not interested in having some random person pop into the stream and say things that are unrelated to the conversation that I'm having or have to do with someone else or whatever it happens to be. And so in that way, I think it does improve upon the experience. I don't agree with a lot of the negative complaints that have been made about this, but we'll see how it plays out for sure.
Yeah, and I would say that, just for the record, I agree with you. I think having a little bit more control goes a long way to appealing to people who, especially people who face a lot of like trollish behavior online. This allows them to kind of be on Twitter in peace, in a relative sense of peace compared to what they had before, and just kind of how, can kind of control the experience for them a little bit more. So I appreciate that. I think the flip side of that, and where some of the criticism is coming, is that, some people are looking at it and wondering if this is going to strengthen things like filter bubbles and stuff. For example, like if I'm posting something and I get someone who's coming on to correct the record or whatever, to correct, hey, actually you got this thing wrong. And they're like, oh, okay, great. I welcome that. But if I'm posting something that is completely, like a conspiratorial or off the fact train of thought, just in fact, what is the word I'm looking for here? Not factual. There we go.
There are many. Yeah.
Yeah. But if I'm posting something that is not fact based, let's say, or that that is against a group of people, let's say, I'm trying to find a good example, but I'm coming up short. And I limit it to only the people that I want to be on there, then no one can come in and say, hey, wait a minute, that's wrong. And from that perspective, I don't know. I don't know if that's, if that's going to help the situation, help the conversation, if people can kind of stay locked into their filter bubbles and not be challenged. But there's always the other side of that, which is sometimes that challenge is completely unwelcome. And in fact, it's damaging. And I don't want that either.
That's a really good point, because one of my things that I often will do when I see a claim being made on Twitter, I will scroll down and look at the responses to see where someone, especially if it's a claim that's being made without any links or any kind of sourcing, I'll scroll down and see what the responses are. And if any of them have links and confirmation or sourcing of some sort, then I'll go read that and then use that to inform my opinion on what's actually being shared or whether I take it as fact or not. So yeah, the loss of that actually, that's a big concern. I know at the same time, Twitter has introduced a feature where you can see the retweets with comments of a specific tweet. And so it could be that that becomes my means now of determining if a tweet is something that is factual or not, where I can look at the retweets with comments and see what people are saying there. It's sort of a different mechanism to get by and responding to something, but it just responds in your own feed. And so that might be the way that we have to do that going forward. Because yeah, that used to be my mechanism. That's interesting.
Thank you for putting it in a more clear format, because I apparently had a very difficult time talking there for a second. So I appreciate you wrapping that up.
No worries. No worries.
What you got?
Should we wrap that up? Mine is a quick one. I think this is a great little feature that Netflix is adding. Essentially, if a Netflix member has not signed in or watched anything on Netflix for a year since the point that they joined Netflix, then they will get a notification either via the app or through email that says, hey, we noticed you haven't watched anything on Netflix in a year. If you don't respond to this email, we're going to go ahead and close your account. So essentially, you stop paying for something that you're not using, which is a good thing. It also works for those who have stopped watching for more than 2 years. So it's like if you joined a year ago, and if it's been a year since you joined and you haven't watched anything, then we'll close your account. But if you joined a bajillion years ago and you kept watching, but then suddenly over a period of 2 years, you haven't watched anything, we're going to close your account. That way you're not paying for it. And the cool thing is, if you do end up having that get closed down, if you rejoin within 10 months of it being closed, you'll still keep your favorites, your profiles, and your viewing preferences and all of that kind of stuff. So you could log back in later. Netflix makes it super easy to sign up, but they continue to improve upon the experience of canceling, which I think is great because it also speaks to the quality of the programming that they will not. I think a lot of subscription services will sort of go for the, we hope you forget, so that you end up paying for at least that first month of non-free trial. Netflix will alert you as your free trial is almost over. And then this goes on with that to say, hey, if you're not using this anymore, you might as well get going. And frankly, all of us could use an extra $10 to $15 a month if we're not using that account. Although I continue to use Netflix pretty much daily. So I don't know. Doesn't apply to me, but I like that this feature is out there. And I also like the light flex in this press release where they say, these inactive accounts represent less than half of 1% of our overall member base, which is only a few 100,000. So less than half of 1% is a few 100,000 users. That's pretty cool.
So there's a few 100,000 people out there who have not used Netflix at all, watched anything, but yet paid for it on a monthly basis for an entire year. That, for whatever reason, that just kind of amazes me. And I get it. Like, it's easy to lose track of subscriptions, but for an entire year, you've not looked at your bill and been like, oh, there's that Netflix charge again. I should really do something about that. I literally watch 0 things on a monthly basis from there, yet I'm paying for it. I don't know. I understand a couple of months. But at a certain point, like in a couple of months, I would totally be like, okay, yeah, that's not happening anymore. I'll cancel it. But I mean, less than 1%. Yeah, it makes sense.
I'd love to look at the overlap of that less than 1% and the economic 1% and see if there is a big overlap, because I don't know who else is not seeing those tiny, amounts of money coming. Because, whether you're financially secure or not, I think that still a lot of us pay attention to what's going in and out of our accounts. So you got to be making a good amount of money, one would think, to not be paying attention to, like you said, for a year, having money come out of your account and not paying for it.
That is a really good point. I would imagine there's a lot of overlap there. People who have no real reason to pay close attention, maybe. All right. Well, up next, how an image format is actually causing a lot of havoc and turmoil for students who are taking the AP standardized tests. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by ExpressVPN. We're all stuck at home these days. You probably don't think much right now about internet privacy because you're on your own home network, right? Like we think about it when we're going to the coffee shop and connecting to public Wi-Fi, that sort of stuff. But when we're at home, we're at home. It's a safe place to be. Maybe you fire up incognito mode on your browser and you think that no one can see what you're doing. Well, you are wrong if you think that. And that's important information for you to remember. Even in incognito mode, your online activity can still be traced. Even if you clear your browsing history, your internet service provider can still see every single website that you've ever visited. All that information travels right through them. Well, that's why even when you're home, you don't want to go online without a VPN, and that's where ExpressVPN comes in. ExpressVPN makes sure your ISP can't see what sites you visit. Instead, your internet connection is rerouted through ExpressVPN's secure servers. Now, each ExpressVPN server has an IP address that's shared among thousands of users. So you're one of thousands of users using that single IP address. That means everything you do is anonymized and cannot be traced back to you. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your data with best-in-class encryption, so your information is always protected. And you can use the internet with confidence. And you can do that from your computer, tablet, your smartphone. ExpressVPN has you covered on every device you have. You simply tap one single button. They made it super easy and you're protected. ExpressVPN is the fastest and most trusted VPN on the market. It's rated #1 by CNET, Wired, The Verge, and countless more. So protect your online activity today with the VPN that, well, I use it. I trust it to secure my privacy. Visit my special link here at expressvpn.com/TNW. Do that and you'll get 3 extra months free on a 1-year package. expressvpn.com/TNW for the 3 extra months free with a 1-year package when you buy that. expressvpn.com/TNW to learn more. And we thank them for their support of Tech News Weekly.
Thank you, ExpressVPN. All right, picture this. You are in the midst of an exam, your AP test. You're taking it from home because we are in our shelter-in-place and social distancing era, and you are writing out the answer to a long-form question. The timer is counting down. You snap a photo of your answer and upload it to the server. You upload it in the test-taking application, and the test-taking application tells you that you did not submit your answer in time and you have failed your test. That sounds like an utter nightmare, and it is exactly the nightmare that students are experiencing. We have Monica Chin from The Verge here to tell us all about it. Welcome back, Monica.
Thank you. Great to be back.
Yeah, we are happy to have you here and happy to have you tell us about this. So, I mean, you know, that's the basics. For some reason, and you'll explain this, when a student or multiple students are taking photos of their answers and uploading them, it's not working. So I think the thing that surprised me was this test-taking method that involved writing out answers. So can you talk about that first? How is it that why are they taking photos of their answers, and what's going on there?
Yeah, so a lot of the there's all these different tests. There's like physics, there's AP Lit, there's math, all these different types of things where sometimes you have to, for example, solve a physics problem, and you could type the answer out, or type your work out, but a lot of these kids are used to doing this stuff by hand. In school, they're used to writing in notebooks. They're used to take, if they have the option to, and a lot of these cases they do have the option to instead just write out your work or write out your answer and submit a photo of it. That's going to be easier for them. So
Gotcha.
On a lot of these tests, they have the option to either submit, they have the option to type out an answer, or they have the option to handwrite and submit a photo. And that's just the easier thing for a lot of them to do.
Okay. So yeah, that makes sense. I can remember taking some AP tests where typing out some math would be kind of difficult. And like you said,
Right.
if you leading up to this, your test prep involved a lot of handwriting, then it would make sense. So they go to upload the file, and then they learn that their answer was not submitted in time. What's going on?
Yeah, so the issue, obviously there are a lot of different reasons why someone might not be able to submit a test. We've heard about people's Wi-Fi cutting out. We've heard about some potential browser issues. But certainly one of the big reasons that a lot of kids haven't been able to submit these answers is image formats. So this testing portal that they're using only takes a couple formats. It takes JPEGs, it takes PNGs, it takes PDFs. But it doesn't take what's called an HEIC file. And that is the default format that photos are saved in when you take a photo with an iPhone or an iPad. It's also a format that some Samsung phones support. It's not just iPhones, but iPhones are the majority of the phones that we're talking about. So this information was out there, and some students clearly got it, but some students didn't get it. And, I think with any, technical thing that you have to do, there's always going to be a large number of students who, don't get the info or don't understand the info. Mm-hmm. So in this case, we had some students who just tried straight up to upload photos from their iPhones to the testing portal and then didn't know why they didn't go through. We had some students who knew that they couldn't submit HEIC photos, but didn't know how to convert them. And so they tried different things. I talked to a number of students who said, oh yeah, I just changed the file's name from .jpeg to from .heic to .jpeg. And I thought that had converted the file. And then when they tried to submit those, they found that they couldn't. We talked to one student who tried to use Windows Photo to convert a photo from his iPhone, and then that didn't end up working. And, it took too long and he wasn't able to submit. So we had students trying a bunch of different things. And it turns out what you actually have to do is you have to go into your phone settings and you have to change the way that the photos are saved from .heic to .jpeg on the phone itself, or you have to send the photo to yourself through Apple's Mail app and it converts the file automatically. But there are a lot of students who didn't get that message, and so that's what we were looking into.
Yeah, not only didn't get that message, but it seemed like from what you wrote about that, like this was a message that kind of went out on Twitter, and I don't know in what other capacity they were really kind of pushing that message out there. But when you're looking at the amount of students who have iPhones, at least here in the U.S., it's a pretty large percentage when compared to other OEMs. I mean, how much emphasis or blame could be placed on the folks who created this system for not supporting that file format? Like, I understand the iPhones, added this a couple of years ago. There is a way to revert it, but there are a lot of places that this file format is kind of not supported. For instance, if you send an email with an image from your iPhone, it automatically converts from HEIC to a more compatible file format. So there's awareness that this file format needs to, it isn't going to work in every capacity. How much of that responsibility falls on them that they didn't support that, knowing those elements?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to just put blame on one institution or one group, because I think there's more that everyone could be doing. It does seem like the College Board, there are instructions for what you're supposed to do on the College Board's, coronavirus FAQ website. They have been disseminated in some emails and in a series of tweets. But there are clearly still students who didn't get the message. We talked to a lot of students who said, well, I never got this email that the College Board says they sent out, or, I don't have Twitter, so I didn't see these tweets. The tweet that they put out that morning didn't come out in time for me to, in time for my testing slot. Is that the college, certainly probably some of the blame falls on the College Board. You would hope that, they can get the message out to everyone. Is there some responsibility of schools too? Are schools doing as much as they can to make sure that students are getting all these communications from the College Board? That's also probably, a place where we would hope we would see more. Should students be looking harder for this information, and making sure that they have all the information, definitely it's, I think it's an unprecedented situation. You hear that kind of that rhetoric a lot. And I think, this is a system that the College Board is trying for the first time. So I do think and that schools are trying for the first time. So I do think it's great that, that they have made as much of an effort as they have to get this information out there. But it definitely does seem like there are some students who are being missed. In terms of the technology specifically, the HEIC format is still very sort of difficult to use on a lot of platforms. Slack, for example, has a lot of trouble with HEIC photos as well. It's still sort of, it's a format that's great for iPhone users because it's a smaller format. That's sort of the big advantage of it. It's more efficient. So you can fit like a lot more photos on an iPhone than you could if they were saved as JPEGs. But there are definitely still, a lot of compatibility issues, even with bigger services like Slack. So, is there, I think it would be nice if the College Board could find a way to take HEIC files. It would also be nice if they made it easier for students to get the information for how to fix the problem themselves. I think either would probably be reasonable.
Yeah, an interstitial at the beginning of the test that says, if you've got an iPhone, do not proceed until you follow these steps would be great. That, at the very least, seems to be a way to handle this if they can't update their system to support the upload of HEIC files. My one question for you, are students, when I took AP exams, I came from a low-income household, and so I qualified for a less expensive form of the AP exam, or less expensive fee for the AP exam. And so that had me thinking about the cost of AP exams for both. Even still with that discount, it was expensive. And without the discount, it was expensive. Are students going to be able to retake the test for free? Are they only going to have to retake this portion? Are they going to have to retake the whole thing? What has the AP board said, or the College Board rather said, about sort of fixing this mistake going forward?
Yeah, so the nice thing is going forward, the College Board has put out a new system where if you're not able to retake your test at the end, if you're not able to submit your answers, there will be an option where you can email them instead. So they're going to provide you with a unique email address that you'll be able to use, and you'll get a notification at the end of the test on the screen that says like you couldn't submit your answers. So that's good, and that I hope that'll be helpful for students who are taking them in the next few weeks. That unfortunately doesn't it can't be retroactively used for students who in the past already took the test and weren't able to submit. And that's still a big concern for a lot of students. We heard from some students who said, that the retake won't work for their schedules because, they're going to have a job or they're going to be going off to the military. And, there are some students who just don't want to have to sit through and retake the whole thing. They don't want to have to keep studying. They were just hoping to be done. And so, it's an unfortunate situation for sure, but there are still a lot of students. There's still a petition going around, actually, where students are saying, the College Board needs to let us resubmit answers that we wrote for the first test if they're timestamped and all that kind of thing. But it doesn't seem at this time like, at least the College Board hasn't announced they're going to be doing anything like that now. So it seems like for the time being, we are going to see a lot of these students having to retake. And, the hope will be that that there's, by that time, there's been more of that information disseminated about what they need to do to fix their file formats so that it can go more smoothly.
Definitely. Well, Monica Chin, I want to thank you so much for joining us today to tell us about this, frankly, sad and heartbreaking,
unfortunate
issue. Yeah, unfortunate at the very least. If folks would like to follow your work online, where can they go to do that?
You can go to Twitter. I'm MC296. Or you can go to theverge.com, and that's where all my writing is.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you again, Monica. We'll see you later. All right. One thing that this whole pandemic that we're in the midst of right now has proven to many people, watching world premiere films in the comfort of your living room is a viable alternative to actually taking a trip to the local movie theater. Now, obviously, it's not the same experience. But many films that were intended to have theatrical releases are instead releasing direct to home for a premium, and they're doing pretty well in the process. So what is the movie theater experience, industry even? What is it going to look like when things return to whatever, the normalcy ends up being? Joining us to kind of ponder this future is Eric Ravenscraft, who wrote an article about the future of movie theaters for OneZero. Welcome back, Eric.
Hey, thanks for having me back on, guys.
Yeah, man, it's good to see you again. So let's start with the forces of change that the theater industry is facing right now. I mean, it's really kind of, in some ways, I've seen a lot of people write and talk about the fact that, some things, that changes that are happening in the theater industry have been a long time coming. It's just this pandemic and the stay-at-home order and everything has accelerated things. What is it facing right now?
Yes, that's completely dead on. The film industry has kind of been struggling because theaters have, for a very long time, enforced an exclusivity window. When a big movie comes out, it goes to theaters and it stays there for at least like 3 months before it's allowed to move to, rentals on Amazon or a streaming service or whatever. And studios would love to close that gap. Most movies make about 90% of their money in the first month. So it's just 2 months of people being excited about a movie, but they can't buy it online or something. So what the pandemic caused, sort of, is an acceleration of that window to collapse to nothing. There's no theater to go to. So the only option for some studios is to release their movies online in whatever form they can. Universal had a lot of success with Trolls World Tour, where they released it online for $20 a pop, let the whole family watch it at home, and they did fairly well. So there's been kind of an open question of, since we know that studios can make money in the home video market without a movie theater, what is it going to look like when movie theaters open back up? And that's kind of a difficult problem to solve right now, because the only way we know for movie theaters to make money is mainly by selling overpriced concessions. Movie theaters are independent companies. They don't make the content that they are exhibitors for. They don't own the merchandising rights. They don't own anything except popcorn and tickets, and they give most of their ticket money away to studios. So what I discuss in the piece is the possibility of what could happen if movie theaters were actually owned by someone else rather than being an independent organization. So say Disney owned some theaters. They could maybe make more money in a theater by selling Avengers merchandise in the lobby. If you go to see an Avengers movie, it's weird that after 2 decades of superhero movies, you can't buy a Spider-Man action figure in the lobby. Like you've never been able to do that. And that's money on the table, but movie theaters have no incentive to do that. Separately from that, a lot of tech companies are starting to make their own content, rather. Apple is producing movies. I think they just got the rights to a Tom Hanks movie. Amazon is obviously making a lot of their own movies. Netflix is already clashing with theaters over The Irishman because they want theatrical releases, but they want streaming very quickly after that. So there's sort of an open question about whether or not tech companies would also want to buy theaters. Could Amazon exhibit their own movies in theaters and have a Whole Foods concession stand instead of overpriced popcorn? Maybe you've got overpriced organic peanuts. I'm not sure what you would put in a Whole Foods snack concession stand, but there's the possibility that they could make more money by being owned by a bigger corporation.
Are your thoughts here also kind of circling around the fact that, or the possibility that some of these big tech companies would then be making movies in and of themselves? Like, I realize Amazon, has their own production wing. Let's say Google or Facebook owns a Facebook cinema. I'm kind of blowing my mind just thinking about that, and realizing I probably wouldn't go there. But I mean, are you saying that they would also get into the content creation business, or it would just be, hey, we've got a really great place to market some of our other stuff?
Yeah, they already have. Apple, Amazon, and Netflix all make their own content. Google, Facebook, and Microsoft don't, but they also don't have a streaming service. So I think if you're going to have a streaming content service, you need to have some originals. Netflix tried for a long time to be the destination for everyone else's content. They were where you go to watch The Office and Parks and Rec. But eventually the companies that own that content go, we could make a lot more money by doing this ourselves, or at least we think we can. I don't know how many people are signing up for NBC's Peacock just yet. But at the very least, those companies want to stop giving a cut to a third party, so they pull their content. Or, in the case of Friends, they could make more money by selling it to someone else for even more hundreds of millions of dollars. So if you're Netflix in that situation, you're going to be a little bit screwed if all you have is someone else's content. So you need a Stranger Things, you need Altered Carbon. In Amazon's case, you need, I know they have big shows that are, I don't watch a lot of Amazon. Man in the High Castle. There we go. Man in the High Castle. But you need something that's your own that gets people in, and then you can fill in the gaps with content you buy from someone else. So Apple, Amazon, and Netflix have their own streaming service, which means they have to make their own content. You can't do one without the other. The only reason Google and Facebook aren't making their own content yet is because they aren't making their own streaming service yet. But you do one, you got to do the other.
Yeah, and you could see a world where they get into that too. You could totally see that happening. Now, Amazon, you wrote in your piece, Amazon was reportedly interested in an acquisition of the AMC theater chain. I realize this is kind of still in the rumor world, but has there been any read on what Amazon might have envisioned in there? Exactly what you're talking about, like taking some of their online properties and giving it a theater in which for it to play, so it gives them some sort of access to like Oscar territory or something like that.
Yeah, I do want to be clear. Like, that is a rumor, and there's some other outlets that are going, we're not so sure about that. So a lot of this is speculation. It's hard for us to get in the mind of Amazon. But if we try to imagine what they would do, first off, if a movie wants to win an Oscar, at the very least, it has to exhibit in, I believe, Los Angeles County for 1 week in a for-profit theater. You can't just do a nonprofit. They loosened that rule this year for obvious reasons, but generally speaking, it has to be in a theater. Netflix actually tried to, or I think is in the process of trying to buy the Egyptian theater, which is in that county, which would allow them to exhibit a movie in their own theater and automatically qualify for the Oscars unless they change those rules. So the first thing you get is awards accolades, and that can lead to increased attention for your products. The other thing that Amazon could get is access to around, I believe, a little over 1,000 theater locations. Now, I'm going off my memory here, but I believe Whole Foods only has around 500 locations. It might be more than that, but even if not, there's 1,000 new places that if Amazon buys AMC, they've got new retail locations. They could have, like we said, concession stands in the lobby that sell Amazon products. You could very easily imagine Amazon setting up an Amazon locker. So if you want to pick up a package or something that you ordered from Amazon, I'm going to a movie on Friday. Why don't I have that delivered to the locker, and then on my way out, I just pick it up? That saves Amazon on some shipping, and it saves you a little bit of time, and you don't have to wait at the door or whatever. And like we said, they can sell more products there. I would imagine Amazon would have an easier time cutting retail deals with studios. So Disney wants to sell Spider-Man merchandise. Amazon's got a warehouse full of Spider-Man merchandise nearby. Why not cut a deal with Disney to open up a shelf and say, you pay us this much money, you can sell this many Spider-Man toys to kids on the way outside the movie theater. And I think on top of that, most people who go to movie theaters know that you're buying two things. You're buying a ticket and you're buying snacks that are way overpriced. And that drives people away. One of the chief complaints you hear is that I don't want to go out to see a movie that costs $100 once you account for snacks if I can get it for $20 at home. The tickets aren't that much more expensive, but the food is. And your kids aren't going to let you get away with not buying popcorn. But if you say, we're not getting popcorn, but you can have a Spider-Man action figure, at least you feel like you're getting a little bit more for your money. You don't hate, getting it quite as much, and your kids have more fun. You've got something that lasts after you leave the theater. And I'm not a retailer, but I imagine the margins on Spider-Man action figures aren't that much different from the margins on popcorn.
Or heck, even when you're talking about, Amazon owning a movie theater and concessions being, historically very expensive because that's how the theater makes money. If Amazon owns it and you follow Amazon's kind of value model that they've applied, that they, was a big part of their acquisition of Whole Foods and the Prime and all that kind of stuff. And you can kind of envision an Amazon movie theater where, part of the marketing, part of the draw is like the Prime model applied to movie theater food. Yeah, you're used to spending $20-$30 on concessions, but when you come here you only spend $12 because we're Amazon and we give you that value, and they're making the money that way as well. Right. Very, very interesting. I could totally see that happening. Now, you mentioned in your piece the 1948 Paramount consent decree, which I'd never really heard of that before. What is it? How might that apply to, let's take, for example, an Amazon merger with AMC? How might that apply?
So these are a bit of an obscure legal, it's not even necessarily a law. Basically, in the 1940s, the Department of Justice sued a handful of studios for basically creating a vertically integrated monopoly. The studios owned the theaters. They blocked anyone else from exhibiting their movies. If you went to a Universal theater, you only got to see a Universal movie. The consent decrees were essentially a compromise between the Department of Justice and the studios. It said, we think what you're operating is an illegal monopoly. We filed a lawsuit over it, but as a settlement, you agree to follow these specific rules, among which included not owning your own theaters. So studios had to stop owning their own theaters for a while. Now, the legality of this is complicated, and I'm not a lawyer, but the basic gist is that was generally believed to be illegal at the time under the circumstances, and studios agreed to follow those orders. But the companies we're talking about now didn't exist or weren't big players then. Disney wasn't a major studio at the time. Amazon, Netflix, and Apple didn't exist. So there's some question about whether or not they would be allowed to own movie theaters right now, whether it would constitute an illegal monopoly, and if it did, whether or not the Department of Justice would even pursue that. Currently, under the current administration, the Department of Justice is looking at rolling back those consent decrees. They argue that if you were an independent filmmaker in the 40s, your only option for distributing a movie was the theaters that the studios owned. Now you've got a lot more options. You can put it on a streaming service. You can upload it to YouTube yourself. You're not blocked out of the film industry by the studios that own the theaters or could own the theaters. You've got plenty of options, so competition exists. All of that's very speculative right now, and we don't know if the consent decrees are going to get rolled back. And it's even a question of whether or not a tech company could buy a theater and get away with it right now. But they also sort of have. Netflix is leasing a theater in New York. Amazon or Apple's trying to put movies into movie theaters. There's some edge room here. I think no tech company wants to be the first to go, we're buying up a theater chain come and get us, Department of Justice. But especially when it's up in the air right now. But there is sort of this dam that could break. If the Department of Justice comes out and says consent decrees are no more, I imagine you'd see tech companies and studios be a lot more brazen about owning theaters, or at least exploring the option of how they could make money by owning a theater. But it's very hazy right now. So
everything is very hazy right now. That's like the chapter of this book that we're in right now. Everything is hazy. That's the title. Eric Ravenscraft for onezero.medium.com. Eric, it's always a pleasure to get you on. Where can people follow your work online? Obviously OneZero, but if they want to follow you online, where can they go?
Yeah. Obviously OneZero. I'm actually a freelancer right now, so OneZero is one of my main clients, but you can find me on Lord Ravenscraft at Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube now. So that's where you can find my work.
Right on, Eric. Keep up the great work. I love what you do. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Eric.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Take care. All right. And that is it. What do you think, Mikah? Do you think watching home premieres at home instead of going to the theater, do you think that's okay? Are you happy with that?
It's okay, but man, I'm having trouble justifying the expense. I get it.
Yeah.
And I get why it costs so much, but every time one comes up, like that Scoob movie, for example, I just have trouble hitting that button on rent for $15 or whatever it is.
Or 20. It was 20 for Trolls World Tour. I mean, it seems like the price is really designed for group watching, and so that then you have to divide that by the number of people and still do the mental gymnastics of around, like, we're so used to spending between $2, $3, $4 to $10 for something at home on our TV. And this is different because this would be in the theater and you'd be spending more than this, but you're not. You're at your house and it's still $20 or whatever. So it's like you have to like suspend your legacy view of how much watching something at home costs for a rental. It's kind of like
in a movie, how you have to suspend your disbelief in order to fully enjoy a fictionalized film. You have to suspend your disbelief whenever it comes to paying that extra price. And I can't do it. At least, not now. Maybe and I think it's gonna depend on the film too, because the next time Taika Waititi releases something that he's written or produced, I'll happily spend the $15 to $20 on seeing that. So maybe it's just that Scoob and Trolls World Tour is of no interest to me, spending that much money when I can wait way down the line and probably never watch them. But in the event that I would, spend the $4 or $5.
Yeah, and not to mention, at least, I've been a lifelong, fan of going to movies, going to the theater. I used to work and manage a movie theater for a number of years. So I love the experience. So there's always the experience aspect that I will always crave to a certain degree. But I will say, like, in the last couple of months, we've done a few of these kind of theatrical releases at home. And yes, they're expensive, but it's been kind of nice. Like, okay, well, we would have gone to the theater for this, but we're watching it here and we've made our own desserts and we have
everybody's got their Mike and Ikes and
everybody's all, cozy in a blanket or whatever. So, it's kind of nice that way too. So no doubt.
Junior mints.
Oh, frozen Junior Mints. Make sure and put them in the freezer.
Yes. You know what good
now
is.
I want Junior Mints.
I've got some mini peppermint patties downstairs, which are essentially Junior Mints. So, so much sugar, but so good.
Exactly. Tech News Weekly publishes every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. We're going to let you go now so you can hop online and order yourself some Junior Mints. But before you do that, make sure and go to twit.tv/TNW and you can subscribe to the show in audio and video formats or link out to YouTube. We publish there as well.
Of course, please do follow us on social media. We are at TWiT on Twitter, at twit.tv on Instagram, at TwitTalk on TikTok. Just the other day, host of our panelist on MacBreak Weekly, Alex Lindsay, said, if you're making content and you're not watching TikTok, then you are not doing it right, because TikTok is speaking to a whole future of content. So it's good we are on TikTok. TWiT Talk on TikTok. If you want to tweet at me or follow me on social media, pretty much anywhere, I'm at Mikah Sargent. And later today, I'm answering one of the most common questions and troubleshooting things I've ever received with Hands on iOS, which is twit.tv/HOI. It is about battery health and battery life on your iPhone. If you are struggling to keep your charge for a long period of time, or you notice your phone slowing down or maybe shutting off randomly, this has everything you need to know about battery health management on your iPhone. So please do check that out. Jason, what about you?
Nice. At Jason Howell on Twitter. Are you on TikTok, Mikah? Do you have a TikTok?
I am on TikTok. I just am a lurker. I'm a lurker, but I am on TikTok. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been checking that out more and more too. I set up an account, that Jason Howell. I have one video on there. Who knows when the heck I'll put anything else there. I was like, yeah, you're probably right, Alex. I should probably do that. Anyways, at Jason Howell on Twitter. Let's see here. Hands on Android. A new episode just published this morning. Thank you, John, for pushing that out. This week's episode is Chrome for Android. Some tips and tricks, some easy ones. And then I go into the flags section of Chrome for Android and find a few cool features that you can put on if you kind of know the secret ways of getting there. And it's experimental. And I just love that stuff, finding little secrets about apps that we always use. So Chrome for Android, tips and tricks, go to twit.tv/HOA, and you can subscribe to Hands on Android there and find the episode, and I hope that you do. Thanks to everyone who helps us do the show each and every week. Of course, Burke in the studio, John pushing the buttons and editing after the fact, and thanks to you for watching and listening. We'll see y'all next week on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. Bye.
Be sure to check out the other shows on the network, like my other show, Hands on Wellness. I love to share different tips and tricks that's going to help you get a better grasp on your personal wellness. Just go to twit.tv/how and subscribe now.